Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. The information here is strictly for educational purposes only and is not a recommendation to trade. You are solely responsible for your own trading actions. No members of DSC Capital were harmed in the making of this video.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Nostradamus. Going to go on over the weekly outlook on where we think oil's going to go. This is Lord Sean Connery, and I'm here with Mohammed, and we're just going to go over some charts and some scenarios for the week.
What's up, everybody? So for the scenarios for this week, kind of just looking back at what really is catching my attention. So the first thing that we have is we have this balance area. Now this was from last week. The market was in this, really it was a 5-day balance because we're including this Friday as well. But the market was in balance and we broke away from that balance. Now, if we're breaking away from balance, expectation is it's likely to, to at least see some trend to the downside towards those lower targets. However, that's not what this did. Instead, what we did is we just put in another balance. Let me change that color. We just put in another balance. So, well, one, for all those who know Dalton and follow the auction theory, something that Dalton says is when the market breaks from a balance just to find another balance zone, that's likely the market, getting exhausted, and we may see a reversion. A reversion to where? We could see a reversion back to the vPOC for this distribution, and the vPOC of that upper distribution is, let me just get that up. The vPOC of that distribution is up here around 59.94. So based on that idea that the market broke from one balance, expectation when it broke is for it to continue lower. We did not do that. Instead, it found another balance. It just accepted a little bit lower. Based on that, I am looking for a possible reversion higher upwards of this vPOC. Now, how do I expect that to play out? One, there is this key area over here. This is sort of like a decision zone for the longs, or just like a key area that I think the longs need to hold for it to head higher. So what I would be watching for is pretty much, let me just change this. What I would be watching for is the market to sort of test within this structure. It may test the vPOC, may test the slow volume node, but as long as this structure, this general area holds, I think we may see a revision higher, which would start working its way back towards this vPOC of this upper distribution. And that's my key target for the long. It could head higher. We do have these uh, naked,
Take a VPOC.
naked vPOCs up here, which great targets, but for me, I'm mainly looking for a return back from this lower distribution vPOC towards this upper distribution vPOC. Uh, do you have anything you want to add to that, Rob?
Yeah, so the last 2 days that we had, the Thursday and Friday, those were over the Thanksgiving holiday, and we did have some selling, which kind of coincided with the end of month. So we have that big weird Friday action, and it seemed like that Friday action was coming into the week before that last week, to find some of those stuck buyers to get that action going. Um, One thing that concerns me is where are we going to open? Because we have a statement from OPEC that they're rethinking about doing any production hikes. We have there's an attack. I believe Ukraine attacked some facility that accounts for like 1% of oil production out in the Eastern European area. And then, we also have the geopolitical stuff that's going on with the Russia-Ukraine conflict that may or may not come to an end. So we've seen those headlines last week, and I think that a lot of that stuff might be priced in, the Russia-Ukraine, back and forth. Like, oh yeah, there's going to be peace. Oh no, there's not going to be peace. I think that the more we see those headlines, the less they're going to be effective. But now, since we have OPEC kind of chiming in saying, "Nah, we're not going to do any production hikes," that could help um, that could help this scenario as well. I'm just kind of curious where the hell we're going to open. Are we going to open right where we closed last week? I'm not sure. That's the real tricky part. How this thing's going to open and how it's going to start moving. And it's also the first of the month. And if there's a trend, don't fade it. So hopefully, the pullback that you're talking about, to look for, maybe that happens in the Asia and the European session, and then we get something in the RTH to get to get going. But I do, yeah, that does fall in line with my scenario as well, because yeah, last week we built we started to build that balance, and then we tested last week's weekly low, and we had like a look below and fail. It dipped down, and it just could not get anywhere. There wasn't a lot of effort to die lower, and there was some really good initiative movement. Well, not, I don't want to say initiative, but a good impulsive movement off that test, like where we dipped and then we kind of shot back out and came back in. There was a really nice trade on that Tuesday, and that to me was the sign that, okay, you know what, we kind of probed that 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 lower low, like we talked about for last week's scenario, that the lower overall weekly high and lower weekly low. But that's the behavior that we had. We didn't, shit the bed and go down to 54. So
Yeah. And nice about this low too. I mean, it was pretty close to a VPOC that we were both watching. I kind of missed it by like a handful of ticks, but
yeah,
it
it
came
did.
in within that region. So that was like a nice sort of reaction to happen.
Yeah, why couldn't they just let it come in and fix it?
Exactly.
Well, because there's front runners there. Yeah, that's why.
Okay, and then so that's our primary scenario. Now for the secondary, so just looking back at some more sort of key structure, this structure from Thursday, from last Thursday, that's like a one spot that I'm going to be paying attention to, as well as the action from Friday. So, well, really, it's like Friday sort of tested already within Thursday. So if it was to head lower, I feel like Friday's structure should hold. And, wherever this thing does open, if Friday's you know, decision zone up here holds, what I would be expecting is for just a reversion back to this VPOC. So mainly for this week, what I'm really watching is I'm watching for reversions back to either the lower VPOC or the upper VPOC. Those are my two key scenarios for the week. I mean, if it does break this structure, then I think the door is open for this naked VBOC to be tested. Maybe prior weekly low to be tested. That's a pretty tall order, I would say. But if this area does give in, I feel like at that point it is possible for it to head lower. So, do you have
Yeah.
anything to add for that short scenario?
On the short scenario, like the whole fact that we could get like an
All right, everybody. We had a little bit of technical issues with the recording. Rob's part got cut out, and we're not gonna do Rob dirty. We're gonna make sure Rob gets his say. So
I know I was talking for 45 minutes too. No, I'm just fucking around with you. Yeah.
so we were
I
talking
think where we
about
got cut off. Yeah.
was the short scenario, which was we were talking about the market could either test this reference point or this reference point, and then come back towards the VPOC. So you can feel free to say whatever you want, and then we'll just add it in the rest of the video.
Yeah. So what I was saying was, yeah, coming into, to see what happened Friday against that prior Thursday's action, to find sellers there. The one thing that I did mention was up at that MCV POC, up at the 5990s. What may possibly happen is if we get off on a foot headed higher off the bat, and if we come into that MCV POC and we don't instantly find sellers, like we start to come into it, struggle, try to test higher, and start to see impulsive moves lower, like really good reactions lower, that would be a good thing to kind of see, the big stall and the presence of selling. But if that didn't happen, if we actually chopped not only chopped but start really building energy. My thoughts were maybe if there was some more news that could drive it even further, that we could see some retesting of like the 6110s. There were some weak highs there in the 6110s area, and then we could go as high as like 6180s, like almost 62, just to kind of extend maybe the like a prior balance high. That was just possibilities that may be dependent on news. So we could get those, naked vPOCs to the upside cleaned up. But that's just basing it on the fact that we might get some again more news that might favor more upside. And of course, it being the beginning of the month, if there is a trend, do not fade it. So if we do get some trend up scenarios, cool, interesting. Again, and it also really depends on where the hell we're going to be opening. And right now, I'm looking at my book map. It's 4:55 p.m. Central, and I see, the offer at 60.22 and the bid at 57.80. Yeah, that's a pretty wide range of where the hell we're going to open. I would like to see where this opens, but yeah, the seller presence. If we're going to run into some stuck buyers from a week or two back, it's probably going to be at that MCV POC, and that's going to be aligned with our secondary scenario. That would be a great place to find sellers and head lower. Whether we take out last week's low or we maybe truncate and make an overall higher low, that could shift the balance of how things are going to go. So yeah, that's all I really have to say. But that kind of wraps it up for our scenarios. That's our primary and our secondary. I didn't really have a tertiary scenario. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very cool. So now we're gonna wrap up the video. Hopefully this part did get included. We also said that, it is December, so it's like take your time. If you want to review 2025, it's not a bad time to do so, and coming back into 2026 refreshed and ready to go is not a bad thing to do. But I think I'm just gonna wrap up the video over here, and if you guys enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, leave your questions if you have any questions. And that's it. Take care, everybody.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.